pleased to say we're joined by Miatta Fahnbulleh from the government, of course, Communities Minister. Miatta, thanks so much for being with us this morning. A couple of things I want to get through. First off, I want to speak to you about this attack that we've seen in East Haven, this mosque attack. The Green Party have called for police to clarify why it's being treated as a hate crime rather than terrorism. Do you support that call?
We've got to let the police get on with investigating this. We are in close contact with them. We're in close contact with the local authority and the community there. And the thing I would say is that it is absolutely appalling that we're seeing attacks on places of worship. We're seeing attacks on mosques. It is absolutely appalling that we're seeing a spike in hate crime across the piece. And we have got to work together to make sure that we are clamping on it, because there can be no place in our society for this, and we cannot and we must not tolerate it.
I want to go back then to last week, the attack on the synagogue in Manchester. Can you tell us the latest on the police investigation? People are still in custody, still under arrest as a result of this.
So the police are investigating. Again, they will update us when there is more information. We need to give them the space and the time to get on with that. But, you know, for the Jewish community, this is a very dark moment. We haven't had someone killed in this country because they are Jew. And this, I think, is a strong wake-up call. We have seen, again, a rise in anti-Semitism that I think is completely unacceptable. And whether that is low-level anti-Semitism or that is the sort of attack that we've seen, and we've got to root it out, we've got to clamp down. We're a decent, tolerant society, we are. But we have people who are stoking division, people who are stoking hate, and it's important that we all take a stand against it.
Now, the Home Secretary's announced greater powers to deal with protests. Before I speak specifically about that, we saw protests in the hours after the synagogue attack. We saw protests this weekend in support of Palestine. Should those protests have just been stopped? Should they not have gone ahead?
The right to protest is sacrosanct in this country. It's the difference between us and authoritarian regimes, and I will always support the right to protest. But, you know, we are neighbours, we are a society, we are a community. And at a point when people are grieving, I would have hoped that people would see that and feel the compassion and empathy that said, let's give some space. But there is always a balance. There is absolutely always a balance. People can and should always be able to protest, and that is how we deliver social progress in this country. But equally, we need to make sure that there isn't intimidation of people, that people aren't scared to go on the street because protests are happening. And critically, that where you have elements, and there are always those minority in any protest, that will be aggressive, that will be trying to use those protests for malign reasons, we need to make sure we're clamping down on that and that we're taking action.
OK, so why did it take an attack on a synagogue, 2 people being killed, people being injured, for the Home Secretary to bring forward these greater powers?
Well, look, we've done a huge amount since we've been in government because we recognise the threat to the Jewish community. So, for example, £18 million we're investing in the Community Safety Trust to make sure that we are providing security in our synagogues. I think it's a travesty and tragic that we're having to provide security in places of worship, but that's where we are. We've been working with the Jewish community to make sure we're putting in place a set of measures so that people feel safe in this country. But it isn't enough. You know, people are angry, people are scared, and we have got to do the job of working alongside our Jewish leaders and our Jewish community to make sure they feel safe and protected in this country.
But they don't at the moment, do they?
They don't. They don't. For good reason, because we have seen an increase in anti-Semitic hate crime. We've seen an increase in aggression to the Jewish community, and I think it is absolutely unforgivable and unacceptable. We will do our part as government, but this is a wider question for our country and our society. We need everyone to stand up and say, not in our name, not in this country. Hatred against any community because of the colour of their skin, because of their race, because of their religion is absolutely unacceptable, and we cannot and we must not tolerate it.
A couple more points on this before we'll move on to housing. I promise you that. But we heard just yesterday from the Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel, who criticised the government for what she described as out-of-control immigration from Islamist communities hostile to British values. How do you respond to that? Well,
look, I haven't seen that comment, and I don't think that is what's happening in this country.
I think immigration's out of control from Islamist countries.
Well, I don't think that's the case. I think there are 2 things that are happening. There is a question of social cohesion in this country. Now, that's something I have responsibility for as the Minister of Communities. And the thing that I am absolutely committed to doing is making sure that we can bridge between our different communities and faith. You know, when you go into our streets and our neighbourhoods, when you talk to communities, there are huge bonds that bind people together, and people will stand together in common ground. And there will always be people that look to stoke division, that look to stoke hatred, and we've got to push back against that, and we've got to try and bridge that.
Is that what she's doing?
On the specifics of immigration, though, let me address that. Look, we have lost control of our borders. There is no one that sees people coming on small boats and thinks that is a state of affairs that we want. That is something that we've inherited from the last government. We're getting on with the job of fixing that so that we do have secure borders and we have an immigration system that works, because it is completely broken at the moment. And that means where people need refuge, that we're providing that in terms that make sense. But critically, it means that we have a process that goes through applications quickly, that is fair, that people understand. That is not the system we have at the moment. It is broken. It is now our job to try and fix that.
OK. Let's move on to housing. Announcement today that the government hopes will see more completions for buyers, but it's going to cost sellers more, isn't it?
Well, look, the thing I'd say is anyone that has bought and sold a home will tell you it is an absolute nightmare. It's a process that's too long, it is costly, yes. And so we are absolutely clear that we've got to overhaul it. And this will be the biggest shake-up of the home building market that we've seen in the generations. It will be good for both sellers as well as buyers. And the reason
cost sellers more, though, isn't it?
Well, no, it's not. Okay. So one of the things that we're proposing in this is that there will be all the information you need about a property will be provided upfront by sellers, including the home condition survey. Now, we believe that that will reduce the length of the process. So taking it down by about 4 weeks, but critically, it will halve the numbers of failed transactions. Failed transactions cost the typical seller about 800 quid. If we can halve that, that is massive saving for them. Yep. But critically, it's about making sure that that process is fair, it's about making sure that process is quick, which is good for the seller, and it's absolutely good for the buyer as well.
Now, there's some places north of the border and from the opposition party that might have some ideas for you guys. First of all, the Scotland piece. I mean, Scotland have a system very different to England. They have more completions. More homes are being built there as well. Why don't you still... What's going on up there?
Well, so some of our proposals, we are looking at what they're doing. So they, for example, do upfront information about the property. We think that's a good idea.
Gazumping out in Scotland?
Exactly. We think that's a good idea. That's why we're doing it. But critically, they also have a binding conditional contract. So one of the things that we are proposing is once we've got upfront information, that is now the norm. There is transparency at the start of the process for everyone. We want at the offer stage for that to be binding conditional, which means that both parties are locked into that process. We think that will drive down the number of failed transactions. It will deliver savings for the seller, but critically, if you're a first-time buyer, that's 700 quid that you're saving through that process.
700 quid is not too bad. Now, the Conservatives have a plan to give you £5,000 out of your national insurance towards your first home. I mean, that sounds like a good idea, because the cost of that first deposit is the thing that puts most people off from buying that home. Why not just take that idea?
I'm going to try not to roll my eyes. Look, the Conservatives had 14 years in power and they oversaw an acceleration of our housing crisis. They have categorically failed to address this issue.
Address this idea, though.
So their idea, the first thing I would say is that we absolutely need to help first-time buyers. That's why, for example, we've put in place a mortgage guarantee, which means that more first-time buyers can get mortgages. That's why we're seeing a reduction in interest rates, and critically, the loan-to-deposit ratio, which is the thing that really gets those first-time buyers. We've put in place policies to make sure that we are reducing that loan to deposit. But critically, the way that we solve this problem is that we've got to build more homes. That's the thing that the last government didn't do. That's the thing that we are absolutely committed to doing. So they can chuck out all the gimmicks that they want. They had 14 years, categorically failed. So quite frankly,
and you did miss your target in the first year of building those new homes. And I spoke to one of your colleagues just a couple of days ago, said you've got to get to record numbers in the next 4 years to make sure you meet that 1.5 million targets.
So we are committed to 1.5 million homes. We absolutely are. Anyone in the industry will tell you there's always a lag. There is always a lag. So we are, if you like, paying the price of the last government's failure. In our first year, biggest reforms to planning that we've seen in a generation. We are seeing record investment in social and affordable housing, 39 billion, which will be absolutely critical. And we've put in place mandatory housing targets. We're starting to see the dividends of that. So a 29% increase in housing starts compared to last year. We're committed to the 1.5. We're absolutely running at it. We will deliver the 1.5.
Miatta Fahnbulleh, I'll hold you to that, as I'm holding Matthew Pennycook to it as well. They're going to come back in years to come. We're going to discuss it again. Miatta Fahnbulleh, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.